Hi. Well, June 29th, things are getting better with the COVID. Well, there's some outbreaks. We're in the pandemic, post-pandemic. So things are in New Jersey are not too bad, which is pretty cool. Um, Phoenix and the Falcon, my first novel. You could get it on Amazon. I've been doing readings from it, as you know. I've been following it, live streaming on YouTube and Facebook, and we're up to chapter 8. So as you remember, if you've been following Helena, who's been through really a lot, she lost her whole world twice. Her She was traveling to Persia with her grandfather to be reunited with his family that she didn't know, because he felt he was getting older and was concerned about his health. En route, he dies, and she ends up in this really wretched village in the by the Aral Sea, what would become the steppes of Russia. And she makes a kind of life for herself, but she's hoping for, you know, rescue, because her grandfather was a man of means. 5 long years, no rescue. She has a son by this husband that was forced on her, Mikhail, and in the middle of the night, Volodymyr comes, who's an Ostrogoth, quite good looking, and all hell breaks loose because he's heading a band of Huns. So she tries to escape, and it doesn't work out. She runs. She doesn't trust Volodymyr to rescue her, save her. She was going to try to get away, and in this process, her son was killed by Giulia, who is the bad guy of the piece, who is a full born Hun, all the mutilations and such, and very sort of high ranking, and jealous of Volodymyr in effect. So Helena has a choice because they're traveling. Volodymyr's traveling under Attila the Hun, who, as a young man, I has him a young man, so I took a lot of liberties. Why not? You don't know much about Attila until he gets older, except for when he was in Rome, hostage to Rome, and got pretty bitter. And so now he's on the steps marauding. I took license with that. Yeah, could have been. And so Volodymyr realizes that Attila might want her as one of the prizes of the village. So his choice is to marry her, and he puts it to her, and so she's thinking about it. And meanwhile, there's a really the silver lining for her is Volodymyr has a servant named Karatapan, who is from Persia. It's not I took license with the name, but he's an old guy, and he's very fond of Volodymyr because he's been given his freedom. So this time, it's really not a good time not to have money or power, because you end up in subordinate roles. But so we're in chapter 8. So she's in the tent waiting to see, getting prepared for this wedding. Chapter 8. Karachapan interrupted Helena's reverie. May I enter? He asked. Come in, she said, jolted back to the moment. Along with a small bucket of water, he brought a simple dress which was draped over his shoulder. Catching Helena's eye, its fabric shimmered with blue and green. With unexpected poignancy, Helena was reminded of the Black Sea and the screeching cries of gulls. Craten's smile was quiet with satisfaction as he placed the garment on her lap. Its color reminds me of your eyes. I hope it does justice to your beauty. She shook her head with firm denial. In the village, she had felt awkward, out of place, and not pretty. Even in Constantinople, in her grandfather's loving home, she had considered herself lacking and somehow inferior. From hushed servants' gossip, she had learned her bloodlines were not pure Persian like her grandfather's, but mixed. Her mother had been Thracian, descended from the Celts. Though Belucistram had often praised her intelligence, even as a young child, She had sensed his disappointment that she looked more Celtic than Persian. His praise of her features had sounded hollow in her ears, especially as she grew older and more aware of his preferences. Yet, despite his prejudice, she had never doubted his love. More than once, Lena had wondered, had her mother lived, would he have acknowledged her, his only grandchild? She had heard several versions of her father's courtship of her mother. All agreed that he had been wildly in love to the point of being disowned. Her grandfather was fiercely proud of his ancestry, never speaking of Helena's Thracian heritage, damning it with silence. On the rare occasions when anyone spoke of her mother, they never called her by name, just Michelia's wife. Her father had added to her confusion during a rare sojourn in Constantinople. Though she'd only been 5, she could still picture his face as he whispered that she had her mother's eyes. He stroked her hair, then her body. When she whimpered with fear, he had pushed her from his lap and stalked away. He left the next day. His farewell to her had been perfunctory, tainted by a cold, hard stare. When he visited her a year later, he had avoided her. After that, she hated her resemblance to her mother. She wished for her grandfather's eyes, so blue that they rivaled the richness of the sky. She came back to the moment. Thank you, Karatapan. It is more beautiful than I deserve. Your kindness is the true gift. You must have thought of it earlier than just this afternoon. His answering smile was warm. You are worthy of far more. He gave her a small bow. I'll be outside should you want anything. Alone again, she stroked the dress and realized it was made of silk. With care, she placed it on the sleeping pad. Her motions were slow, even pensive, as she sponged herself clean and rinsed her hair. Shaking her head, she set aside her melancholy, spraying droplets from her wet hair. As she dressed, the silk felt smooth and soft against her skin. The sensation brought her back to Constantinople, to when she had shared her grandfather's evening meal. When they had guests, her dress would be fine, often made of silk. From the dining room, the sounds of the water splashing in the fountain would drift in from the courtyard. Through the open doors, she would watch the phoenix in the mosaic floor, its flaming wings glistening in the torchlight, a mystical bird who found rebirth through a fiery death. Her childhood memories were seductive, an indulgence and also an escape from grief that gnawed at her soul, hurting her like an open wound. She turned from them and combed her hair methodically. As a girl, she had dreamed of love, but Kanzor had crushed her romantic illusions. Yet Valomir's lips on her forehead had been gentle, though passionate with restraint. He was a barbarian, riding with the vermin of the empire, Huns. But she felt safe with him. Not since her grandfather's death had she been so well protected. Smoothing the folds of her dress, she studied the flames in the small fire, knowing she would never be ready for what was to come. She prayed, Lord, be with me, then softly called for Kratapan. His response was brisk. Yes? I finish. May I enter? Her voice was dull. Yes. Looking up, she saw compassion in the old Persian's face. She gestured for him to sit beside her. Despite his mutilated calf, his body moved with inherent grace as he accepted her invitation. For making him a cripple, for stealing his poise, she hated the Huns even more. Did your love give you much pain? She asked in a whisper. He smiled with irony. Perhaps I'll speak of my difficulties one day. But dusk draws near. Soon the shaman will wed you to Valamir. He paused. May I help you, Helena, granddaughter of Belusistram? Against sympathy, her defenses betrayed her, caving into nothingness. Her voice broke. I've lost everything. My child, my grandfather, my life in Constantinople, all that I love is dead. This man, this Goth, seems to care for me. I don't understand why. Even he doesn't seem to know. Maybe in another life I could have felt something for him, but not now, not with this emptiness. I look into the fire and wonder if I'm dead. But then I think that I wander in darkness, and the wise Lord has stopped looking for me. Taking her good hand, Kratapan patted it. Helena, all is not lost. Valamir has pledged to bring you back to Constantinople, and you're not alone. I'm a compatriot of sorts, and Valamir's heart is open to you. I think that he has fallen in love for the first time. I've never seen him like this. She studied his wrinkled hand over hers. Kratchpen's voice continued with persistent gentleness. Two choices are before you. You may forge a new life or retreat into the heartbreak of what once was. Surely your grandfather, a descendant of Zarathustra himself, must have taught you about the forces of dark and light. You must ask yourself, which path takes me to the wise Lord? Which path away from him? How shall I best follow the precepts of the five Gathas, the true teachings of our prophet? You have been denied death for a reason. You may not know why now, but one day it will become clear. She shook her head, but his voice was kind, though insistent, wearing her down as water over stone. My words are not empty, child of the light. Remember, once I walked through darkness, neither having nor wanting any hope. Knowing he spoke the truth, she could not help resenting his tempered, philosophical words. So long as she grieved for Mikhail, he was not gone. She sensed another possibility, a connection woven with light and joy. Misery was easier. The thought of embracing life again was too hard, requiring yet more stamina and courage. During her years in the village, these qualities had been transformed into a simple will to endure. But that strength, born of stubbornness, had vanished with Grelia's sword. She looked at Kratchpen's face. His blue eyes twinkled with wry intelligence. You've an inner light, Helena, he said. Kratchpen, my world is ashes. Once Constantinople was my home. Without my grandfather, it's just a pretty place with a fountain and a courtyard. The village was never a home, only Mikhail, but he's bones, bleached by the sun and wind. Nothing's left except revenge. Even Grelia's death won't bring back my only joy. She looked at Kratchpen with narrowed eyes, suddenly suspicious of his kindness. Did Valamir ask you to talk to me? No, Helena, I speak of my own free will. She searched for any sign of duplicity, but found none. Relief hit her hard, like a wave, and she realized how much she relied on his friendship. Did Valamir speak the truth about Attila, about this wedding? Would I be in danger without this wedding? Kratchpen's lined face stiffened. No one can foresee his reactions, Helena. But I know that he would be struck by you. Perhaps you don't realize it, but you have an air of elusive beauty, like a bird before flight. You are lovely. In this place, with this tribe, that puts you in jeopardy. Marry Valamir. He's far, far better than his compatriots. He has a heart. At his words, she cringed. For 5 years, Helena had shielded herself from men as best she could. Without her consent, Cansvar taught her one side of marriage. The idea of another joining made her afraid. She wished to be alone with Pasiel, taking her somewhere, anywhere across the windy steppes. Kratchpen squeezed her hand. Come outside, Helena. The shaman waits. She did not want to move, but she followed him. As the tent flap swung behind her, she was buffeted by the wind. The sun, dropping to the horizon, made the shadows long. Her mind was silent, becoming the moment. A feeling of unexpected peace filled her, and felt oddly devoid of lingering doubts and questions. When Kratchpen offered her his arm, she took it. Together they walked northward, away from the camp and a long stone's throw from the tent. He led her to where Valamir and the shaman waited. Valamir stood, his hands behind his back, and watched her approach. He wore a robe the color of the sun, orange combined with yellow. As it moved with the wind, she realized that he had shed his leather for silk. His hair was combed back, his face clean-shaven, animated with anticipation. Thudamir was beside him, scowling first at her, then his brother. She did not acknowledge him, or the men surrounding him in a semicircle. They were irrelevant. Her eyes fixed on Valamir, her steps moved with him with Kratchpen's slow pace, each movement bringing her closer to the blond Goth. As she reached him, the last of her fears fell away. She was like the drum beating slowly to the right. She was the fire in the circle of stones, and she was the setting sun. She was nothing and everything at once. Valamir's blue eyes kept her anchored to the ground. In silence she knew him. Kratchpen joined her hand to Valamir's. The physical contact felt warm, giving substance to the oneness she felt, not just for herself, not just for Valamir, but the wind, the cold earth, even the faint sliver of moon. She stepped over the gray stones into the circle. Thudamir left his brother's side, leaving Valimir and Helena alone with the shaman. In his arms, the priest held a small, bleeding goat. She shivered, fearing for the white animal, not wanting more innocent blood to stain the earth. The shaman was a Hun, with all the barbaric insignia. The self-mutilated cheeks, the splashes of gaudy colors placed haphazardly over his other clothes. Yet, unlike the others, he wore a long cape of pelts. His hat was unusual, made of furs and feathers, with the beak of a large bird at its brow. Intertwined hair from horses' tails hung like tassels from the top of a ball on his tall staff. Despite all of his paraphernalia, Lena was not afraid of him. His expression was calm and reflective, as if he saw the outside world from afar. He pounded his staff twice to the earth. The drummer increased his beat. He spoke in Gothic. "Woman, what is your name?" She responded in the same language. "Helena, daughter of Michaelia, granddaughter of Lucitan of Constantinople." As she spoke hauntingly in one of the tribe's dialects, the drummer broke his rhythm, if only for a moment. Across from them, Thudamir clenched his jaw with anger. He had not suspected her knowledge. Valimir squeezed her hand gently and smiled. No longer seeming far away, the shaman's eyes absorbed her. His intensity made her want to hide. But holding his gaze, she no longer felt alone, as if her grandfather and Mikhail stood as witnesses in the light of the one God. The shaman nodded at her gravely. "Helena, daughter of Michaelia, granddaughter of Lucitan, do you take of your free will Valimir, son of Valdarius, grandson of Vincerius, as your husband?" Her voice was low. "Yes," she said. The past impinged on the present, her heart beating quickly. She remembered Cansbar as he officiated at their wedding ceremony. His kiss had been crushing, foreshadowing what would come later on his bed, with some of his wives watching from the other side of the screen. As the shaman placed his hand over theirs, Helena returned to the moment. "Valimir, son of Valdarius, grandson of Vinitharius, do you of your free will take this woman, Helena?" His voice was deep. "Yes." "Then I join you together as man and wife, husband and wife, man and woman, husband and wife, through all time until death takes you." Letting go of their hands, the shaman stepped back a pace. "Do you, Valimir, have an offering of your love for your wife?" "Yes, my mother's ring." Vivian gasped and muttered something under his breath. The ring was exquisite, delicately wrought, Thracian gold, with a large red ruby. Helena felt both overwhelmed and humbled. As Valimir placed it on his fourth finger, he whispered, "With my love." Her eyes closed. The tears were hot under her lids. With the ring and his words, he was breaking her heart, forcing it to feel again. She had nothing to give in return. "Do you, Helena, have an offering of your love for your husband?" Valimir spoke urgently, his voice muted. "Holy One, the goat has been given in her name." She felt an unexpected urge to give him something equally special. Yet her possessions were meager. She became her essence, still and calm, and from its depths sprang her gift. Disregarding Valimir, she spoke to the shaman. "Yes, my grandfather's horse, Pasiel." She whistled for the stallion. With his deep whinny, he answered. In moments he appeared, a broken lead line dangling to the ground. A murmur of appreciation swept through the small crowd. Pasiel snorted nervously and tossed his head. Valimir's eyes were bright. "You are generous, Helena." As she looked at Pasiel, her heart was sore. All at once, she regretted her impulsive gesture. The shaman pronounced, "It is good." He pulled a long knife from the folds of his sleeve. With a firm, steady motion, he drew it across the goat's neck. Remembering Grilia's sword, she began to shake. With a gurgle, the goat died. Lena whimpered. Valimir's arm comforted her, holding her tight. With his hand, the shaman scattered drops of blood throughout the circle. Smelling it, Pasiel snorted, his eyes showing white. Kratchpano at his head calmed the horse with soft words. "You are wed," the shaman said. "As the sun sets to rest on its bed, Bevian, Ishiat, and all these others will be the tribe's memory, remembering Helena and Valimir's vows." He placed his bloodied hands over theirs. With all her strength, Helena kept a scream in her throat, her legs from running. Your union is sealed with a shared sacrifice. Be at peace with each other and the tribe. Then without ceremony he turned and walked away, silent and alone, the dead goat in his arms. Valimir swept her up into his arms. He kissed her briefly and softly. The men cheered. Lena did not listen. They seemed far away, someplace else. She studied Valimir's eyes, so serious, inhaling his spicy masculine scent. He steadied her, causing her turmoil about the shaman and his knife to fall away. As he left, the men clapped Valimir in the back, congratulating him. Thudimir kept his distance, merely nodding as they passed. Looking anxiously for Pasiel, she relaxed as she saw Cratchpan leading him towards Valimir's tent. Still carrying her, Valimir strode through the twilight and took her to the stream. In silence he put her down and knelt, rinsing the goat's blood from his hands. Without hesitation, Lena followed his example, grateful for the opportunity to wash herself clean. He stood and extended his hands to hers. She took it. He pulled her to him, holding her close. He whispered, "Helena," and lifted her into his arms. Inside his tent, he set her down. She waited standing, uncertain of what would follow. He turned away, almost as if he did not want to be too close. Taking a seat by the fire, he was preoccupied and self-absorbed. She sat across from him, at a loss by his withdrawal. Staring first at the ring and then his face, now so remote she felt adrift. His eyes met hers. "Are you hungry?" he asked. At the mention of food made her stomach rumble. The sound cut the tension and she smiled. He touched her hand. "Pasiel belongs to you. Your smile is my gift." Lena shook her head. "I did what was right. If you'll accept the return of your mother's ring, I'll take back this Pasiel." His eyes softened into sadness. "No, it's yours. It even fits. She would have liked you very much. But Valimir, it's valuable. One day when I return to Constantinople, then you'll always remember the man who was once your sworn husband." His words shot like an arrow into her heart. She was silent, then spoke almost under her breath. "You, I'll never forget." Moving with the grace of a giant cat, he sat beside her, his arm around her shoulders. Though he held her firmly, she did not feel trapped. "I must eat," he said. "We break camp tomorrow. The day will be long." But his lips pressed hers, hungry with need. She did not stiffen against him. Still in his embrace, he lowered her to his bed. Her heart beat in its panic. She felt like a wounded wild bird, immobile and unable to fly. He kissed her deeply, consuming her mouth, only stopping because she pulled away. His eyes were intent, but he did not speak, staying at her side. Cansbar's abuse hung like an iron wall between them. Ashamed of her terror, she averted her face. "Helena, I need you. As I speak, my hands want to know your body. My lips want to bring you joy. Keeping my promise would be hard." Words caught in her throat. Finally she spoke. "I can't be a wife to you, Valimir. I'm only a shadow of myself. Even that vanishes with the wind, leaving an empty shell." He pulled her closely, stroking her hair, then her neck. "I want only you, Helena. Your troubles I would share." She tenderly touched his shoulder. His response was immediate. He kissed her again, long and hard. She managed to whisper, "I can't." He murmured, "I should go, Helena, now." Yet when he pulled away, she felt alone. "Please stay," she said in a small voice. Wrapping his arms around her, he smiled. Without further intimacy, they lay together. Though the small fire in the hearth burned brightly, the shadows in the tent grew darker. The smell of meat cooking outside permeated the leather walls. His breath brushed her ear. Cratchman's made his dinner. He stroked her brown hair and kissed her lips, touched his lips to her forehead. With a laugh, he kissed the tip of her nose. Her eyes became serious. His eyes became serious, turning inward to a private remembered pain. "Just this once, Lena," he said just before his mouth descended. As his lips joined with her, he engulfed her. In her mind, she heard a wordless scream, the cry that always come with Cansbar, but she did not feel the same revulsion. As Valimir pulled away, his eyes probed her face. He touched her cheek softly. "Will you forgive me if I don't take you to Constantinople? I don't know. I can't think. Who knows? I only have this moment, none other. Let tomorrow take care of itself. You're all I ever wanted in a wife." "How can you say that?" she asked. "How can you know me? I don't even know myself anymore." He smiled. "Do you want words to explain what I felt when I first saw you?" "I don't have any. I only know that you have a home with me as long as you like." She lay motionless in his arms. His voice was a whisper. "You come into my life, bringing destruction. and then salvation. If you hadn't been there, I wouldn't be alive, or I would have been better off dead. When you're here, I can forget, if for a moment." She paused. "From the beginning, I felt I'd known you before. Beyond that, I can't say, Valimir, except the tent feels empty when you're gone. You bring me joy. The Lord is cruel to bring you into my life on the day he took me kill. Who can know the God's plan? But they helped me find you, that I know." He briskly stood, his hands clasped behind his back, and changed the subject. "Lena, how much of Cansbar's treasure was your grandfather's?" Surprised by his abruptness, she blinked. "All of it. Why would he travel with so much wealth? He was very rich. Most were to be gifts for his relatives, but I don't think he planned to return. He was growing old. He wanted to find my father and see me safely married." "Do you think your father is still alive then?" "Well, we'd had no word of him for a long time. The grandfather would not admit it. My father's silence goaded him into making the journey. He wanted to find him." "And you, do you want to see your father?" "He's a stranger now. I was young when I last saw him." "And the relatives?" "None of them ever came to Constantinople. I don't know them." "They're your family, after all." "When Mikhail was alive, I thought about escaping day after day. I planned to make my way to Ishkar and find any relatives who still lived there. For my grandfather's sake, they would have welcomed me and Mikhail as his great-grandson. Yet in their hearts, they would despise both of us." "But why, Helena? How could they not value you?" "Because my mother was Thracian. In their eyes, I'm an offense to their ancient lineage. Forgive my frankness, but they consider the Thracians no better than barbarians." "Don't be ashamed of your mother's legacy, Helena. It is every bit as noble as any Persian's. I told you, my mother was of Thrace. She yearned for home, never loved my father. He'd give her no choice but marriage. It comforted her to tell Bevian and me of the Celtic legends again and again. You've reason to be proud of your mother's family. Is that why you've been kind, for your mother's sake?" Hunger played across his face. He returned to sit beside her. With fear, not passion, her heart beat quickly. He checked himself. "You look like her. I won't deny it. Even Thudamir sees a resemblance. Her eyes were green like yours, and you've had the same high planes at your cheekbones. But you're more fire." She gave in to her heartbreak. "You're a fighter, Helena. I've seen it with my eyes. I can respect your strength, but love your beauty. It's easy to marry you. You fill my heart." She touched his cheek, then his muscular shoulder. "I don't want to go to Persia." He smiled and kissed her gently. "Stay with me, Helena. Wherever if you want. I'm happy when you're here." Her face became hot. She blinked away tears. "I've never known anyone like you." He laughed. "Good." Then he sniffed the air. "The meat is done. I'm hungry, Krachpan." They waited by the fire. Krachpan came inside quickly. His keen eyes searched her face. His smile was soft. On a large leather plate he carried meat and some flat bread. As he placed it before him, his expression turned serious. Ishiat had sighted them. They returned. Valimir was casual. "Many captives?" He saw only one. "Only one?" Watching Valimir tear through his meal, Krachpan nodded. Helena's appetite had vanished with the news. "Did anyone manage to kill Grilia?" Valimir asked. "He survives." "Too bad." Valimir turned to Helena and spoke with strong conviction. "You must not act against him. He's Attila's cousin. I couldn't protect you against the lawful revenge." At the mention of Grilia, her throat tightened. "You must promise to wait, Helena," he said, "or I have to take measures for your own good." She was vehement. "What do you mean?" "I'll risk your hatred and keep you tied in my tent, Krachpan. Tell her about the punishment for the theft of Grilia's blood. Even if you only wounded him, the Huns would cut off your nose, then your ears. If you somehow managed to kill him, your death would be hard and very slow. They would tie him down to witness your dishonor. He'd go mad with the watching." "They'd never take her alive, Krachpan. You'd suffer in her place, Valimir. Someone would have to pay the price." Lena wanted to gag. Then she wondered how Grilia's wounded arm from her knife feared. Krachpan continued, "With my own eyes, I've seen this and worse. Listen to Valimir for his sake, if not yours." She was quiet for a moment. "I don't want to bring you pain, Valimir." "Do you promise not to take your vengeance?" "He deserves death, but it will not be from my hand," she said in a quiet voice. In her heart she knew that if anyone had survived, it would be Maga. With her knowledge of poisons, Maga would be able to exact revenge on Grilia. He would not have been gentle with his freshly captive prey. Elena's expression became distant, as if seen. as if far seeing as she wished Maga success with their tormentor. So that's chapter 8. So you might have heard my little dog barking. That would be Mindy. She's a cute little Sheltie. She's unfortunately pretty blind, so I should have. Sometimes I'll have her outside with her brother, but so at some point I'll have one of my dogs. I'll show you the cute Shelties. So anyway, I will read chapter 9 next week. Um, it's been fun doing this. So we have more to read, but if you really want, you can get this book on Kindle, and I'd appreciate it. And subscribe to my YouTube channel if you think of it, and just have fun. I'm having fun with this reading and enjoying it. So have a good night. I'm going to sign out. Got to put my glasses on. I can't see up close anymore. Take care.